Welcome to SkillSprint. My name is Pawel Glowacki. I'm working for Embarcadero as EMEA Technical Lead for Developer Tools, and today we are going to discuss the steps necessary to build your application and deploy it to app stores, both Apple iOS App Store and also Google Android Play Store. How the SkillSprint works? SkillSprint is a short technical session that demonstrates just one feature at a time. In this presentation I'm going to use Delphi 10 Seattle release, but I could also use C++ Builder Seattle release that is part of RAD Studio 10 Seattle. Applications creating with RAD Studio can be natively compiled and run for Windows, for Mac, for Android and iOS. Today we are going to focus on mobile applications, so applications that are created and natively compiled from the very same source code for both Android and iOS. So before you can publish your application to App Store, you need to create the project, build the user interface, test the application functionality, and then there are certain steps necessary to prepare your application for store deployment. So the very first step is to use Delphi or C++ Builder. They have exactly the same capabilities and possibilities. The only difference is the programming language. In Delphi we are using Object Pascal programming language. In C++ Builder we are using C++. In order to create mobile application, you need to start with the multi-device application project, and then you can start building your application. Now I'm going to create application that is called Molecule Hero. So you can see on this Android store application already created and deployed and ready to be installed on any of the Android devices. So instead of giving the virtual company the name like Pawel Glowacki, I wanted to make it more professional and decided to create a brand called Super Lolo. The source code of this application is available for download from GitHub. You can go to the github.com/pglowacki/molecule and you can download all the files that are used to create this application, and you can play with this code as much as you like. There is a MIT license that gives you all possibilities. You can do whatever you want with this code. Okay, let's switch to my Windows 10 installation. So this is another virtual machine that I'm running, and here you can see the project has been created with file new and multi-device application Delphi. This is a simple 3D interactive chemical viewer application. So what is a typical scenario is that you first design your application, and during the development it's very handy to compile your application for Windows, because from the very same source code you can build your application not only for Windows but also for Android, for iOS and for Mac. So let's run this application as a Windows application, so we can see the basic functionality of my Molecule Hero. So Molecule Hero reads information about the chemical molecules stored in a PDB format, and there is a certain number of the PDB files hard-coded in the inside of this application, and you can easily switch between different modes. So this application lets you visualize the chemical structures as atoms and bonds. You can also display the chemical molecule as just atoms or just individual bonds. So this is the functionality. You can also zoom in and zoom out, and there is also another image, another form that gives information about the Molecule Hero application. So this is the application, and now I'm ready to start creating its version that are used for Android and also for iOS stores. One of the first considerations when you design the your project to be used inside of the App Store is the loading time. So you want to make sure that your application loads as much as possible. So if you have multiple different forms in your applications, you can see I have a number of forms, but not necessarily you want to create all forms at the startup of the application. So in my example, there are two forms, the main form and also form about, that is not created at the application startup, but the very first moment when it is needs to be displayed, the application logic checks if the reference to the form about is nil or not, and if it's nil, the form about is created and is owned by the application. So this is one of the first considerations, is to make sure that your application display your forms loads as fast as possible. Okay, so first we are going to, I'm not going to go into the details of the source code of this application because you can download it from the GitHub and play with the source code as much as you like. Rather, we want to focus on the steps necessary to deploy this application, first to Android Google Store and then to Apple iOS Store. So if you want to create application for Android, first of all, you need to, in the project group, you need to select Android as your target. Also, you want to make sure that the build configuration is set to release and not to debug. And then I can go into the project options and prepare this application for deployment to the App Store. So there are certain places you need to go. So first of all, you want to deploy the artwork. So the artwork is important path of your application. So there is a number of different icons, screens, splash screens that you need to provide as part of your application. So these icons will be used on the App Store and also on the device itself. So I have created this Molecule Hero icon, but if you don't do it inside of the installation of Embarcadero RAD Studio, under the bin directory, you will find an artwork folder that contains all necessary files with images with different resolutions for both Android and iOS. So it's a good starting point to actually take this whole structure and deploy it somewhere where your source files are located. In my case, I have artwork as a subfolder inside of my folder where I keep all the files that makes up this application. So here I have a shared files. I can go to my documents, and I have special folder called PG Apps, and here in the version 1.0, this is the folder where I keep all the files that makes up the project, but also as a subfolder there is an artwork that contains all necessary icons and splash screens. So that's a good practice, because you can copy this whole folder with the artwork subfolder, and it's not a absolute path, it's a relative path. So the first thing is to provide artwork. Then you need to specify also the version info. So if you want to deploy to the App Store, you want to make sure that you actually select auto increment for application store, because this is what application store expects. Another important thing is to make sure that you change the package name to something that is not Embarcadero. So if you create a new project, you will find in the package name com.embarcadero. and the name of the project. So this is this module name. So this is important thing to change this name, because you don't want your application to be named Embarcadero. You want to provide your own name. And then there is a provisioning tab in the project options. So here you can switch from the development to the application store. So the application store, this tab has all the information necessary to build your application for deployment to Google Store. So first of all, you want to generate the key store file that is necessary to build your application for development. You can do it by using the new key store wizard. So this will gives you all the necessary information that you need to provide to build your application and create the key store file that is used and necessary for deploying to Google App Store. So this is where you can generate this key store file. It's important that you keep this key store file secure, because later if you want to provide an updates to your application, you need to use the same key store file. If you don't, then you can alternatively create a new entry in the Google Store. And also you want to create certificates. So this is, you can get a certificate. I have already have this certificate created for me, so I'm all good to build my application for development. So to create an APK file that you want to deploy to the Android Google Store, you need to go to the project options and you can click on build, and this will basically create your application, create the APK file, sign it with the key store file, and you are ready for deployment. So it takes a moment to create the application, and the last thing is to actually click on deployment. So in the deployment tab, here is where you can specify additional files, and if you click on deploy file, the application will be deployed and the APK file will be generated. So this is where my file has been already generated, so I can click on cancel and I can go to the where my application is located, and I need to make sure that I understand where is my APK file that I want to deploy. So in the PG apps molecule hero, and then inside of the Android folder there is a release folder, molecule hero, and there is a bin subfolder, and this is the APK file that is generated. Actually this is right now not signed, but I have already been through these steps and I created a molecule hero signed file. Okay, so that's, I can actually, because I click on cancel, I can actually do it one more time, so it's properly generated and I have APK file ready for deployment. Okay, so when the APK file is ready, you need to go to the Google App Store and create the entry for your application. So luckily all the steps necessary to submit your application to Android app to Google Play Store are documented in a DocWiki. You can find these steps and follow all the steps for both creating application for Android but also for the iOS. So basically you need to have your own account. So once you create your account, you need to make a one-time payment of $25 to Google, and then you can go to the Google Play Developer Console. So this is my developer console, and you can create on the new application. So this is where you can add a new application, and once you add it, I have already did it. So this is my molecule hero. So this is where you need to provide all information. So you will need to actually upload the APK file to production, and you will need to also fill in all the information about your application, like application title, description. You also want to create screenshots of your applications, because these screenshots will be used in the App Store. So if your application is designed also for tablets, then you can provide screenshots from the tablets. And also you want to provide a high resolution icon 512 by 512 that will be used in a display of our application. So then you also want to specify the content rating, and also depending on what kind of information you present. My application does not contain any special things, so it is rated so anybody from the age of 3 can have this application on their phone. If you want to, also you can specify if your application is going to be free or paid. So my application is free, it's for education purposes, but you can also decide that it is not free but paid. Also you can specify in-app products, so your application may be free, but inside of your application you may sell certain features, unlock levels, and so on. So this actually takes quite fast. From the moment that you deploy your application to Google Play Store, it takes a few hours, and then it's ready to be installed on any of your devices. So these are the steps necessary for building application for App Store. Actually, there is one step I forgot to mention. Inside of the project options, there is also something called users permissions. So depending on what kind of functionality your application is using, you may need to actually enable certain functionalities. So maybe if I want to use Bluetooth, I need to make sure that the Bluetooth permission is set to true, and so on. So this is also important during the preparation of your application for deployment. So these are the steps necessary for deploying your application to Android, but also the beauty of the Delphi and C++ Builder product is that from the very same project you can also natively compile your application not only for Android but also for iOS. So in other tools you would need to have different programming languages, different environments, maybe different teams, but here we can design our application just once and deploy it. So here is also there are possibility to build application for iOS device. So since February 2014 15, the requirement is to provide your application as a 64-bit iOS device. So this is the target you need to select. Make sure that you also have the release configuration. And here you also want to specify configuration that you want to deploy to application store. And again, all the steps necessary to submit your application to the App Store are very nicely documented in the DocWiki or with the help file that is part of your application. So basically, the steps necessary to create your application is that you have to first of all, you need to have an account at developer.apple.com. So this is my member center, and this is the place where you can get all the necessary files that are used to build your application and to generate to use certain certificates and deployment profiles. So before you can start building your application, you want to go into the iTunes Connect, and you need to prepare your application for submission. So you see my application is prepared for submission. So this is very similar to the Google console. You need to provide some artwork, you need to provide some descriptions, you need to provide an icon. The icon should be without the rounded corners, without any transparency. It has to be 1024 by 1024, and this is what will be used as an icon, and so on. So when you are done, you need to also download the application loader. So this is the DMG file. You need to have a Mac machine, and this is it installs as part of Xcode. So in my installation in Xcode, you can see in the Xcode there are developer tools, and there is an application loader, and this is the tool you need to use to physically deploy your compiled application to Apple Store. Okay, so these are the steps. So I need to go to the certificates, identifiers, and profiles. And I can see specifically for iOS, I can go to the certificates. So you want to have a certificate for production. So you see, I have generated the certificate that is needed to be able to build your application, your IPA file. And so one thing is to have a certificate, but also you want to create a provisioning profile. So this is where you can actually go and generate your provisioning profile. You do it by clicking on this plus sign, and basically you go through all the necessary steps. You say, I want this for App Store. I can continue. This is where because I have already created an entry on iTunes Connect, it already sees there is an application, so I can specify the application ID. I can continue. And these are the certificates I want to select for distribution. And then in the last step, I can specify the name of this Molecule Hero 2. I already did it with a Molecule Hero 1. And this is where you can generate your provisioning profile, and you need to download it locally to your Mac machine, and then it will be visible in the project options of your project. So going back to all the necessary steps, you can see that it's important to provide a CF bundle identifier that matches the name of your application. So the way how I did it here is there is a com.superlolo.moleculehero, and these are also the options you need to specify in the project options of your file. So in the options, in the provisioning, you want to specify inside of, first of all, we want to go to the application. So this is a version info. You want to include version information in your project. Notice that we are now modifying the release configuration for iOS device 64-bit, and this is where you need to specify the CF bundle identifier that is the same as you generated on your Apple developer page. So also you need to provide a different graphics for your application. Here we don't have an user permissions or entitlement list. If you want to do it, you need to manually modify a plist file that is part of your project. And then in the provisioning profile, you need to specify that you have an application store, and you can specify the provisioning profile, and then you can click on build your project, and you should be able to generate your IPA file. And this is normally it takes longer for the app store on Apple for your application to be available. So my application is not yet available on App Store. I hope that is going to be available soon. So there is about 2 weeks time that Apple has time to review your application and approve it to App Store or reject it. One of the main reasons that application is rejected, that it fails to start or it takes too long to start. So that's also very important that your application is designed in such a way that you can generate your that it starts fast and it works as expected. Okay, so going back to my presentation, so this is in principle the main steps necessary to build and create your application. So it's a good practice to spend time on testing your application. So before you want to upload your application to App Store, you want to give it to your friends and see how they are working with it, and if there is some feedback, you may want to actually change it. It's also important to have a version control in place. So I'm using GitHub. It's an open source place for running open source projects, so you can download this application from GitHub, from Molecule Hero. So there are certain references. So obviously you can find all the steps that I was demonstrating here in the online documentation. So there are everything is very nicely documented. So once you designed your application, you can follow the steps to deploy your application to both Android store and to the iOS store.
Allow me to quickly tell you about some of the special offers we have going on right now. As part of our early bird pricing, if you purchase RAD Studio, Delphi, or C++ Builder 10 Seattle, you can save 10% on your license if you purchase by September 30th. Also, registered users of any earlier version can qualify for upgrade pricing. This is a savings of up to 45% off new user price. Update subscription is not required, but still recommended, and everyone also gets access to the free bonus pack. The free bonus pack includes the new book by Nick Hodges, More Coding in Delphi. This covers topics like writing solid code, duck typing, and multi-threaded parallel programming. You also get the new book by Marco Cantu, the Object Pascal Handbook. This is a modern language guide that covers the new features in Object Pascal, as well as some of the core runtime library. The MITA Converter Basic automates some of the conversion of a VCL application into a FireMonkey application, so you can take advantage of multi-platform application development. Also included is the VCL and FireMonkey Premium Styles Pack. This includes styles for both desktop and mobile for VCL and FireMonkey that allow you to really make your application stand out and give it that premium look and feel you want. To find out more information about the bonus pack and these special offers, visit embarcadero.com/radoffer.
Okay, so thank you very much for watching this skill sprint.